Okay, welcome everyone to the second episode in our Navigating Fair Work, Modern Awards, Positive Duties and all that people stuff series of webinars. This one's on the Fair Work system and the players. So what we want to do in this is there are so many regulators in this space to give you an understanding of who they are, what they do, and also where you can find some useful information on their respective websites. And just a reminder about Ridgeline HR. So we help people in business with people business, all the compliance stuff. We work with something called Employment Hero with some of our clients. There's a cloud-based system that integrates with financial management systems like Xero and MyOb. We do a fair amount of coaching of clients in relation to how to deal with people stuff, and we've been doing that now for 24 years. We also work in the area of cultural change through our POSWork suite of products, which are around the better workplaces, where we undertake a full cultural change diagnostic. Our engagementality, performance and development coaching methodology, which helps managers become coaches and develop people through 5 different lenses. Positive change using the strengths-based approach called appreciative inquiry and better stories, which are around changing the language in our organisations to be more positive, as well as employer value propositions. And recently we've got into, the last couple of years, into animated storytelling. So here's a series. We're up to the second one, which is understanding the Fair Work system and the players. Next month it'll be on the positive duties, and then there's been quite a bit of change in national employment standards in the last couple of years. So running a session on that. That's all of the things that are guaranteed to employees. Modern awards are technical, and they're getting more technical every month. So one of the things that we thought was important was to give people an overview of how they actually work, and some of the tips and pitfalls that there might be in applying them. We have 2 areas where positive duties are coming in, and one is in relation to psychosocial hazards, which will be the 6th one, and the other is in relation to sexual harassment and gender-based behaviours, and that'll take us up to November, and then we'll have a look at whether or not we do something in the new year with the expectation of further changes. So as I said, if you look at sexual harassment, for example, there are 6 different agencies which could become involved in one form or another. And this sort of highlights the reason for the webinar that we're running today. So what we want to cover off are who the primary government authorities and agencies are, what powers and responsibilities they have, where you can find useful information on employing people and what your obligations as an employer are, and where you can find some useful information on how to employ and manage people and deal with workplace issues. And these are the various agencies that we're covering off, although I confess I haven't included anything in relation to the Australian Taxation Office. We might leave that to the accountants, but the 2 key areas are obviously pay tax obligations, 3 areas, tax treatment of redundancies, and superannuation. So as you can see, there's a dozen different agencies play some part in regulation of employment arrangements in Victoria. Liam, can I switch over to you and let you go through the Fair Work Commission?
Of course. Hi all, to those that haven't met me before, I'm Liam Maguire. I'm in Ridgeline HR, working with Peter. And the Fair Work Commission is our first regulatory body, which is one of my favourites, one I have to deal with the most. And I'm sure that I can see a few familiar faces in the crowd who probably also know what the Fair Work Commission is like through working with us. Fun. Anyway, so the powers of the Commission, they set the federal minimum wage and the minimum wages under modern awards via their annual wage reviews they do every year, which become effective 1 July. for those keeping count, 2 weeks from now. They make and vary modern awards and run work value cases. They regulate the industrial organisation and issue and revoke entry permits for unions and union organisers. A point not here, but that some of you will be familiar with, is that they are who you have to deal with when making enterprise agreement, the step to getting it approved and in place. They deal with disputes through conciliation, mediation, arbitration, relations to unfair dismissals, general protection and adverse actions, industrial disputes, intractable bargains, stop bullying orders, stop sexual harassment orders and use sexual harassment jurisdiction, refusal of extension of parental leave, refusal of application for flexible working arrangements and fixed term contractors. Now, everything in bold there is a new power that the Fair Work Commission have picked up quite recently since the Albanese government has taken over. They have become a bit of a monster in regards to the Fair Work process and where you have to go to deal with a lot of the claims that you might have as an employer coming from your employees.
Thanks, Liam. Yes, and yes, I did leave out enterprise agreements, which is what we mostly do.
It's what we mostly do.
One of the things there is work value cases. There was a work value case in the aged care industry which delivered pay increases of up to 28%. This is all around gender equality, and so there is already a case going on in relation to nurses and midwives, and they've forecast future ones that will be brought on in relation to children's services and community services, the SHADS award. There's more to come in that space, and we can expect significant increases in industries where women are the predominant gender in the workforce. So what I've done in some of these is just pulled out some links that I thought might be useful. Now, it's useful for people to subscribe to awards that cover employees in their business so that they get updates from the regulator on changes that are made and when they are occurring. It's useful to check whether a business has an enterprise agreement from different perspectives. If I'm looking for a job in the industry, I might want to go and see if there's an enterprise agreement, and if so, what that provides for. I might want to see whether there's a union presence. So is the agreement made with a union? Or it might be that I'm looking at doing business with an organisation and I want to get a bit of an insight into their character. There is a small business section on the website, but it's very limited. And I suppose in that regard, I would note that the Fair Work Commission, as Liam said, is a monster now. It's just having new jurisdiction after jurisdiction coming in, and particularly now with the ones involving gig workers and independent contractors and road transport contractors, it's getting well beyond the direct employee space. But if you're having to look at the Fair Work Commission to find information on something that's affecting you, the odds are you're already in dispute and you should be getting some advice on how to deal with that, because it is a highly technical area and there are strict obligations on employers in relation to such matters.
So the Fair Work Ombudsman, this is what they have to say about themselves, really, that they're there to promote a harmonious, productive, cooperative and compliant workplace. The responsibilities that they have are to provide education, assistance, advice and guidance to employees, employers, outworkers and organisations, promote and monitor compliance with workplace laws and investigate breaches of the Fair Work Act, take appropriate enforcement action, perform statutory functions efficiently, effectively, economically and ethically. The main, I think, role that the Fair Work Ombudsman see themselves having is to provide education. If you go on their website, that's where you'll find most of the resources for small, medium businesses out of the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman. The Fair Work Commission has quite a limited selection of resources, and as Peter said, it's generally just if you're in trouble, this is what you need to know. You need this form, or this is the information we'll need. Whereas this gives you an outline of awards, leave entitlements, starting employment, ending employment, and everything in between.
And they do have some useful things. So one of the things that I do as a matter of habit now is when I go onto these sites, I navigate down to the bottom to see what links they might have hidden away at the foot. And if you scroll down on the homepage of the Fair Work Ombudsman one, you'll come to a little link to small business. And when you go in there, it actually takes you to a page which has got all this stuff about fair work for small business and guidance on how to go about hiring, how to go about managing performance, ending employment. So there's quite a bit of stuff in there that is quite useful, and it is tailored for small businesses in this section as distinct from the main body of information on the website. And I pulled up a few things here that I think are useful. So one of them is they've actually got learning modules on where you can go through and you can actually get a certificate for completing them, which has to do with everything involved in managing people and dealing with workplace issues, performance issues, disciplinary issues, etc. So that's useful. There are a number of calculators, automated things on the website in relation to pay rates, leave and notice and redundancy payments. Now, one of the shortfalls in the system is that it, in relation to the pay calculator, it assumes you have knowledge of what the award classification for the employee concerned is. And that isn't often easy to work out. So that's something that you might want to get some advice on in relation to where they sit. And then once you know that, you can use that calculator ongoing. Similarly, with the redundancy payment stuff, there are some limitations on that because it's based on the National Employment Standard, and there are a number of awards such as the Building Construction Award, the Plumbing Award, the Textile Clothing and Footwear Award, which have industry-specific redundancy schemes that are different. So it doesn't work. The Record My Hours app is an app that the Fair Work Ombudsman developed in response to a need for employees of employers who didn't maintain time and wages records. So they developed a geofencing app whereby people could essentially record the time they spend in the location of their workplace, and then the Fair Work Ombudsman would accept that as a valid record of their working hours. I understand it is currently undergoing redevelopment, but I think it's due to be back up next month or so. The Small Business Fair Dismissal Code. Now, this was created back in 2009, and in theory, a small business employer, that's one with less than 15 employees, who dismisses an employee, if they follow the code, and there's in essence, a checklist that they can work through, they can use that in defence of an unfair dismissal claim. At the end of the day, to run the argument to have something thrown out on the basis of it satisfying that code is probably going to be more expensive than settling the claim in the first place. Again, that's something that businesses should get advice on. And enforceable undertakings, one of the things that happens if a business is found to be underpaying people is that they can be required to enter into an enforceable undertaking, often as an alternative to prosecution. And this is becoming more the case now under the current government. If a business self-reports, then they're not going to be prosecuted unless it's something really serious. So we can see increasing usage of these, but the reality is that there's an undertaking that's in the public domain and is damaging potentially to the reputation of the business.
Next one is the Wage Inspector at Victoria. They promote and enforce child employment laws for employees under the age of 15, sorry. They made quite a few changes to the way it operates in the last couple of years with regards to licensing and family employees of a family business. So if that's something that you have any sort of interaction with, it may be worth getting advice or brushing up on those rules. The Wage Inspector covers just the basic long service leave, the Victorian Long Service Leave Act, 2018. Owner-driver forestry contractors and freight broker obligations. This is for owner-drivers. It has a stack of information on how to manage contracts properly and how to charge properly for your time and your costs in running the business. It's made essentially to ensure that they can operate fairly in the market with some bigger contractors in that area. And wage theft was part of the wage inspector at Victoria, but because federal rules are coming in regarding wage theft, it's been moved. Victoria wage inspector has removed it from their portfolio.
The area that the wage inspector at Victoria is most active in is the child employment laws, and they have shown a tendency to visit holiday areas during the relative holiday season. So they've been down the beaches over summer, and we might expect them up in the snowfields over winter. So, and they are prosecuting them. The owner-driver forestry contractor, etc. one is an interesting one in the context of the new road transport contractor jurisdiction and the Fair Work Commission, which covers everybody in the transport supply chain, from the person who places the order for something to be delivered through to receipt of it. So, and if organisations outsource or subcontract others to do the delivery work, then everybody in the supply chain can be held to account for if anything goes wrong. One of the things that the owner-driver forestry contractor, etc. jurisdiction has is that they have some guidelines and some guarantees in relation to how rates should be calculated, what factors should be taken into account, and there are minimum periods for notice of termination of contract, etc. So that these are the things that we might see coming in the federal jurisdiction through the road transport minimum standards that might be set by the Fair Work Commission.
In Victoria, we sort of have 5 different areas where you might have to deal with long service leave. First one is Leave Plus, which covers people in the construction and building trades. So, you know, your general construction, but you might also have plumbers and other trades in there as well. They accrue 13 weeks per 10 years, and the employer contribution is 2.7% of the gross wages over a quarter for their employees. The Portable Long Service Leave Victoria, covers employees in community services, contract cleaning and security industries. The employer makes a contribution and that employee can access that regardless of where they're working at the time, as long as they've built up the correct amount of service in the industry. For 1.65% of employer contribution for community services, 1.8% for contract cleaning and security. And then there's the Long Service Leave Act 2018, which sort of covers most other workers in the state. And that'll cover your clerks' employees, that'll cover your managerial employees, and so on, as well as anyone else in other industries that aren't covered by the above. It's non-contributory, so it's just they'll have access to once they've reached their 7 years of service.
So stepping away from that into the realm of equal opportunity, etc., we have the Australian Human Rights Commission, which is an independent third party which investigates complaints about discrimination and human rights breaches. So anyone can make a complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission in relation to sexual discrimination or racial discrimination or religious discrimination, etc., and the conciliation process where they seek to mediate on those claims and reach resolutions. Their power has taken a significant step up with the introduction of the new positive duty to eliminate sexual harassment, discrimination, victimisation and gender-based behaviour, which came into effect in December 2022. And organisations then had 12 months to get their house in order in relation to compliance with the new positive duty. And so that came into effect in December 2023. What they provide advice and resources to assist employer compliance. They have these new investigation and enforcement powers. So a Human Rights Commission inspector or officer can come into a workplace and inspect it for compliance with the positive duty and where it finds breaches, it's able to prosecute them and potentially take organisations to court for penalties. There's considerable crossover with workplace health and safety law because harassment and discrimination are also psychosocial hazards. And I think that the way this is likely to play out is that the Human Rights Commission won't necessarily have the funding to really be able to do a lot of inspection work, and they're likely to focus on a few areas and otherwise leave things to the WorkSafes of the world. One of the things that they have set up is a dedicated site, which is called respectedwork.gov.au, where there's a stack of resources on what constitutes the sexual harassment and gender-based behaviours, and what organisations should be doing and can do to exercise that positive duty to prevent that sort of behaviour from occurring. The Victorian equivalent is the Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. So this is the agency that's responsible to the government for oversight on human rights. It can receive complaints of alleged illegal discrimination, harassment or victimisation, and offers a conciliation service which is voluntary but can be used to attempt to resolve it. Otherwise, complaints of this sort under the Act can be taken directly to VCAT for hearing, or following unsuccessful conciliation through the Commission, they can also be taken there. There's a couple of links I've just put in there. One's to a pay equity toolkit, which is supposed to be designed for small businesses, and something on obligations to your staff in relation to equal opportunity and human rights in the workplace.
Yes, next one is WorkSafe Victoria. They obviously regulate, inspect and enforce workplace health and safety matters in Victoria. And WorkWell as well, which has a suite of free resources for businesses of all sizes. It's got different kits for small, medium and large businesses in that space. There is an absolute mountain of resources on the WorkSafe website. It can be quite hard to navigate effectively to get to what you want sometimes. And we put a couple of links in there, which probably direct you to the small business stuff specifically.
Now, there's another mob called Safe Work Australia. So Safe Work Australia is not actually a regulator, but what it does is it sets government policy and it publishes codes of practice. And those codes of practice tend to be the guidance material for states and territories to then form their workplace health and safety legislation and regulations. So interestingly, there are two codes that have been issued in the last couple of years which have particular relevance. One is the Model Code for Managing Psychosocial Hazards at Work, which was issued in 2022, a couple of years ago. And since then, every state and territory around Australia has been legislating changes to workplace health and safety legislation to deal with psychosocial hazards at work. And one of the reasons for that is the rising issues around mental health and the related costs that are being put into the workers' compensation systems in the various jurisdictions around the country. We'll be running a dedicated session on the psychosocial hazards, and we'll be also doing one on positive duties generally, and another one on sexual and gender-based harassment later in the series. One of the challenges that we have is that with multiple jurisdictions is that they don't necessarily agree on stuff. So in publishing their model code for sexual and gender-based harassment, Safe Work Australia have said that complying with the Australian Human Rights Commission's compliance requirements for sexual and gender-based harassment does not necessarily mean that you satisfy Safe Work Australia's. So, it's past time that regulators got together on this stuff, but unfortunately, We have these problems because Safe Work Australia see themselves as a safety organisation and see Australian Human Rights Commission as a rights-based organisation. So they do their own thing.
Business.gov.au is a whole of government website for the Australian business community. It publishes content that helps business owners from starting their business and planning it to growing it and exiting from it. It has a stack of grants and assistance as well that you can access there. Information on how you can meet the requirements and laws that might apply to your business. Easily access all levels of government and find out important changes in business or industry from where you're from. We've got a link down the bottom there for where you can find information and resources on your people responsibilities specifically for employees, contractors and customers, etc. as well.
Okay, so there is actually a huge amount of information on this website and most people don't know about it. So it is worth having a look at. The Labour Hire Authority is the last one that we're dealing with here. So it's been set up for Victoria because there have been rogue labour hire firms who've, particularly been adept at Phoenix activities where they've dissolved companies and then started up somewhere else trying to avoid obligations, and people have got ripped off in the process. So these are now quite common around the country, labour hire authorities in the various states. And it is illegal for a business to use a labour hire firm which is not registered, and you can get yourself into trouble. So we've got a couple of links there. One's information on labour hire compliance obligations. So there are some guides there that set out what the labour hire obligations are, but also what the hosts are. And you can check the register to ascertain provider's licence status. So if you are looking at using labour hire, then just make sure they're registered. Otherwise, you can get yourself into strife. And just going back with all of that, I'll just run through the 4 steps involved in compliance again. So the first is that you make a definite decision that you are going to be compliant, learn what you need to learn, and put it in place. The second is about capability, which is building the processes, the policies, the systems, providing the tools to enable you to meet that commitment. Competencies about getting people trained in the responsibility they have in relation to this area, and culture is about embedding it in your business practice every day. So what we find in the work that we do, that there are lots of organisations who've done a bit in the area of capability. They've got policy statements or procedures and often borrowed them from somewhere else. So they're not necessarily a good fit. They might have done a little bit of education and training, but they really haven't demonstrated commitment, and we find that often they're not embedded in culture. I often get a question raised with me about, bullying, and the first question I ask is, have you got a bullying policy? And the response I often get is, we think so, which means you're probably already in trouble because you probably haven't followed it. In looking at this stuff, we need to look at the policies we have, the work processes we have, what work practices there are, and what people's behaviour in the organisation. Is everybody walking the talk? Do we have the right policy settings? Do our work processes and our HR processes work as they should? What are the day-to-day happenings in the organisations? And what are people doing? And then with all of this stuff now, with the raising the bar on compliance to this new level of positive duty, which we can expect to flow across everything really now, we developed this model called HEART, which is about the first step is honesty, educating yourself about your obligations and options, and taking a good hard look at your policies, processes, practices and people, so being real about it. Educating your people and engaging them in consultation, collaboration and co-design. You have a duty to consult anyway, but if you take a positive approach to it, that makes a difference. accountability, which is putting the policy, processes, system in place, making sure that you walk the talk and hold everyone else accountable. Reviewing it, so having ongoing monitoring and measurement of your progress and continuing to learn and seek and celebrate improvements, and trust, being vulnerable, listening to your people and building psychological safety for all. So with all of this stuff that we're passing on to you, it's very much about, yes, they're big information dumps, and we're really trying to reinforce the message about how to deal with this stuff as well. And then that's essentially it for today. Thanks, Liam, for your help.
And thank you everyone for attending today. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you at our next webinar on Tuesday, the 16th of July, where we'll be dealing with the question of positive duties and what they mean for small businesses.